All right, guys. Let's move on to that fourth spot in this division, and I feel like 4 to 6 was really tough. It was for me, at least, to determine where things are going to settle out. Kind of in that middle tier in this division, but I landed on the Seattle Kraken. How about you guys?
I did not.
Okay.
But I knew there was going to be disagreement at number 4 because, like you said, Harp, I have any one of these next 4 teams or 3 teams being just as good. So yeah, I'm totally willing. I'd shuffle the deck. I'd put in a random number generator and go ahead and pick that way because it could be anyone. But let's hear what you have to say about Seattle.
Yeah. Well, Chad, actually, why don't we go to you to start talking about the Kraken? You've got the ball cap on and everything, and so I would assume that Seattle is in the 4th spot for you.
Seattle is in the 4th spot for me, but it's not something I was certain about. They're coming off a 100-point season where they had a ton of players score a ton of goals, and they scored the most goals above expected in the entire league. So it's one of those things where, you appreciate the depth scoring on this team, but at the same time, you're a little bit worried because some of those numbers are bound to regress. So in terms of their forward group, I think it is going to be about the same. They are going to have some players regress, like, maybe a guy like McCann regresses a bit. I don't know if he's going to be considered going forward as an elite player. Maybe that's a bad example, but there are a ton of players who scored a ton of goals on this team, and I just don't see that happening again this year. But at the same time, they added a guy like Kailer Yamamoto, they added a guy like Pierre-Edouard Bellemare to sort of round out the group, I think, and bring some different elements. So I think even though they might lose a little bit of scoring, I think their forward group is going to be just fine. Plus, they're going to be adding, hopefully, guys like Shane Wright for a full season, Cole Lind, who's been tearing up the American League. He was a point per game in the American League last year. And also, too, going back to last week's episode, that was a player who Kenny mentioned could be fantasy relevant this year, Cole Lind, just because of his point production at the league below. So, and then in terms of their defense, I think it was kind of the same thing. Like a guy like Vince Dunn might regress a bit after having an incredible year, but they added a guy like Brian Dumoulin, who I just think, again, just sort of rounds out the group. And then in terms of goaltending, they lost Martin Jones, who was actually their starter down the stretch. He played the most games of any goalie on this team last year, but he was also the guy with the worst goals saved above expected on this team. Philip Grubauer, still played a decent amount of games. He's going to be their go-to this year. If I told you I liked that, I would definitely be lying. And if I told you I liked their 3 guys, Grubauer, Decord, and Drieger, I would also be lying because I don't think goaltending is a strength of this team. But all of that considered, I think I could definitely see them getting to that 100-point mark again, or at least 95 plus, meaning that they're a playoff team. The only reason why I'm not certain that Seattle is in a perfect spot in that number 4 spot is because of teams like Calgary, Vancouver, and even Anaheim, who will be taking a step this year. So I landed at number 4 for Seattle. But I don't know. It's all sort of up in the air for me right now. This could be a year in the Pacific because I think the Central might have gotten a little bit worse, where we do see 5 teams make the playoffs. Because when I think of Seattle in my head now, again, coming off a 100-point year, I think to me it just makes sense that although there will be some regression, I still see them as a playoff team, even if it's in a wildcard spot. So sorry, that was long-winded, but go ahead, Casey, on your thoughts on Seattle and maybe some of the other teams that you think fit that 4 spot better.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely looked at this team, and first thing that came to my mind was regression, mostly because of their shooting percentage is like well over, it's like 10.9% last year, which is not sustainable whatsoever. I think they did have a lot of depth scoring, and then that is always a variable. You're not always going to have your third line put up the same numbers as they did last year, same as the second line on this team. So I'm just curious to see where that will go. I'd like to see someone step up and be, star numbers, star scoring. Manny Beniers is probably going to be that guy. And then when you look at all these rookies coming in, it's like you're relying a lot on them when I look at this team. But there's also there's like 12 veterans on this team. You know what I mean? I'm counting Matty Beniers in there because he's played a full year, but I look at this team and I don't know who's going to step out for Shane Wright. Is it Kaylor or Yamamoto? I don't know. I think there's a lot of question marks with this team. And when I start hearing question marks in my own head, I start second guessing a team and I start thinking that, what's the locker room going to be like? And are people going to crack under pressure? Or are they going to play better because of internal competition? I love internal competition, but it's a double-edged sword there. So I do actually like the decor of this team. I think they look hard to play against. When I look at them on paper, I'm like, I don't really want to try to score on this team. I think that everyone is fairly reliable in their own end, other than maybe Vince Dunn, but he is their point guy. He's their power play guy. He's their puck mover. So that's totally fine. I like the decor. Hate the goaltending. Same. I mean, how long have we been saying, like all 3 years, we're saying that the goaltending should be better. I think we're at the point where it's not as much voodoo with Drieger and Grubauer anymore as it is. They just aren't the guys they used to be. And I'm not really looking for them to be better anymore. I'd love to see it for their sake, but I've just kind of given up on this team and goaltending at the moment until they find someone else. So I just felt like maybe I'm looking for question marks and problems with this team because I've historically not been a Seattle Kraken fan. But I just looked at the other teams and I liked one more than them. I did land at 5 for Seattle, which I wouldn't be surprised if it was a playoff spot in this West Conference.
Yeah, I figured that you landed at 5, and I can guess who is at the 4 spot for you, but I won't spoil it because Harper wants to chime in on Seattle.
Yeah, no, I'll keep it quick on the Kraken. Obviously, don't like the goaltending. I mean, Joey Decord is another guy who ripped it up in Coachella Valley in the AHL this past year. They went all the way to the Calder Cup Finals, of course, and had a great team. And so he'll certainly get a shot. We don't know if Chris Drieger is going to be healthy and ready to go. I don't think yet. So they do have an insurance option there in net, but it's obviously not a great 3 guys there. And then this team is just, they're one of those classic teams that just gets it done by committee. Everyone chips in up front, on the back end. Dave Haxtell does a great job, and I don't see this team taking a step backwards. I think they're a playoff team again, wild card, at the 4th or 5th spot. I've got them in 4th, but it's going to be really close between 4 and 6. But with the year that Seattle had, I think there's a bit of recency bias there, and certainly you expect a little bit of regression, but this team just gets it done by committee, and they're a lot of fun to watch, and Matty Beniers is going to take another step forward and become an elite player sooner rather than later. So I like the Kraken in that 4 spot, but it's close.
Yeah, I remember last year I actually listened to our season preview episode for the Pacific earlier today just to see where we were at last year, and we landed on Seattle at 6. But I made a comment saying I wouldn't be surprised if they were a bubble playoff team, and got absolutely shredded on Instagram for posting that. So I think they're kind of in the same place again this year. I think they will be a bubble playoff team. Maybe they've taken a bit of a step, compared to how they were going into last season. But I think between the, even 3 to 6 spot, anywhere in there, I wouldn't be shocked, just because this division is really wide open. Like a team like Calgary had a down year last year. They could be really good this year. We picked them to win the division last year, by the way. Just wanted to share that, and they missed the playoffs, so that was tough. And a team like Vancouver, same thing. They could be great this year, and kind of who knows. So that's why I think Casey mentioned off the top why this division is so difficult and exciting actually to talk about for once, just because it's so close. So Seattle at number 4. Yeah. Seattle at number 4, I think it's 2v1, but it's not a hard 2v1. It's a very wishy-washy one.
Dude, I'm fine with putting them at 4. It's not so much about Seattle taking a step back for me. It's about another team taking a major leap forward. And I just really wanted this on record for me saying that this team is going to come forth. I really do think Seattle is still a playoff team, and I think that the Pacific's probably going to have a wild card, or maybe both. We'll see. But frankly, guys, I have the Vancouver Canucks in the number 4 spot.
Wow.
I think at the end of the season, they had embers. There were embers in there, and I think there's going to be some gasoline dumped on that at the start of this season. It was annoying to see them catch embers at the end of the year and turn things around, because it's like, hey guys, Connor Bedard, would you like him? Maybe continue to suck. But I think we saw some major leap forwards for a few players on this team, and there's so many of them that are just on the precipice of being studs, and it's just like, we just need them. We need half of them to take that step, and this team is going to be a hard to deal with. When I look at their forward setup, I really love it top to bottom. I like how this team's shaped out. Their 2 ads down the middle are going to help this team tremendously. And Elias Pettersson is going to be my player to watch this season, because he will score 110 points, no problem. It's his career. It's his last year on the contract, and he is going to be playing lights out. He already did last year. He hit 100 points last year, and he's going to push even harder this year. I'm so excited to watch him. There's so many guys on this team that could just take one more step and make this team a powerhouse. And Kuzmenko and Besser finally maybe can get back to being a 30 goal scorer if he could stay healthy. And Connor Garland, is he the guy he used to be? Vasily Podkolzin, we want him to take a step finally. What's that? I just blanked on his name. He's been up and down between the AHL and Vancouver.
Nils Hoglander.
Yeah, I would like to see him stay in the NHL this year. I think he's got a lot to prove. JT Miller, we want him to be JT Miller of 2 years ago. Quinn Hughes is an absolute stud. Can't wait for his contract to be over so he can play for the New Jersey Devils. And then they've plugged the holes on the D-core, and not just like put some tape on it. It's Flex Seal. They put Flex Seal on this D-core with Carson Soucy and Ian Cole. I think the upgrade from Dermott and Bear, or Dermott and I guess it was Burrows, OEL. The upgrade from them to Ian Cole and Carson Soucy is great, in my opinion. I really like it. I think they could probably still use one more D-man. Phil Hronek is one of my favorite players in the league, so I might be a little biased on that point. And then goaltending is just another case of, what's Thatcher Demko going to be this season? And I think that he's going to take a major step forward. He's going to have a bounce back year. We already started seeing glimpses of it before, but I think he's still like a top 10 goalie in the league. And if they can get that out of him and, have him playing 50, 55 games, then I think this team's in good hands in net. So there's a lot to like about Vancouver, but I'm also wouldn't be surprised if they were 6th in this division, because Vancouver, we're always waiting for them to be better. They're, no offense, Harp, they're the Buffalo Sabres of the West. It's like, this is their year. This is their year. Well, maybe get Connor Bedard. Well, like, holy shit. So I'm excited for this year. I am a bit of a Vancouver stan, so, grain of salt, but I like this team.
Yeah. So do you think they make the playoffs in the number 5 spot, Case?
Well, I have them in 4 and making the playoffs.
Oh, okay.
But you guys have vetoed that. So I just, again, clip that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I don't have a problem with Vancouver being in our collective 5 spot. I had them at 6, but again, very flexible in terms of these rankings. No Bo Horvat for this season, which, that's a big loss for them. But Anthony Beauvillier was great down the stretch for them after coming over from the island, replaced some of the scoring that they lost in Horvat. Puis Suter is a guy who's going to get some additional ice time on this team. Ideally, at some point, they'll have Ilya Mikheyev back, fully healthy, so that will be a nice add for them. A guy like Teddy Bluger to round out the bottom six. I don't mind their forward group at all. I think it's better built than it was in the past. And like you mentioned, with Elias Pettersson going into his final year of his contract, I think not only will he be playing for a new contract, to try to cash in and make as much money as possible, but I think the team around him knows that they're going to be playing to keep him in Vancouver.
Yeah, exactly. And I wrote that in my player to watch section. Like I wrote his production this year is going to push the team over the top because they have to play well because they need him to stick around long term.
Yeah. And listen, say what you will about, what management has done in Vancouver, the OEL, that whole fiasco was just something that didn't work. There's been a ton of those moves, right, that just haven't worked, and all of the bad money on the books and taking on bad money and trading away bad money. It's just been a bit of a fiasco. But Case, like you mentioned, now when you look at the back end and you have a guy like Carson Soucy to sort of man that second pairing and be a shutdown presence, and then you have an Ian Cole on the third pairing, tough to play against, tons of experience to mentor other guys, a Philip Hronik now to bring some more offense and just be a bit of a steady presence. Even though, at the time we didn't love the trade, it seemed like a lot to give up and we didn't really know the direction of the team. When you look at it on paper, this team is going to be, or they at least should be, pretty good. And they have their coach now, which was a problem in the past. All of that instability, especially the last 2 weeks of Bruce Boudreau, that was an absolute nightmare in Vancouver. But, now that they've got their coach, they've got their core, they've committed to their core, and hopefully they can get Pettersson done sooner rather than later. I don't mind the pick for Vancouver being a playoff team, so I'm more than happy to put them in the 5 spot in our consensus rankings.
Yeah, I am too. And Case, I think you made some great points. I think that Elias Pettersson is going to come out like a house on fire. Again, my favorite term or saying on this podcast, it seems. I used it for McDavid and Draisaitl earlier. I think the same for Pettersson. He is a superstar now in the NHL, and that really was solidified last season. He is going to get paid, all caps, with his next deal with Vancouver, and they have to do everything they can to keep him happy. I like the forward group. You've got good players in the bottom 6 like Bluger. Dakota Joshua is another guy that we didn't mention, but he fit in really well in the bottom 6. And looking at the way that this team played down the stretch under Rick Tocchet, 20-12-4 was their record. And so when you look at that and the way that they played down the stretch in that second half of the season, in theory, this team should be a playoff team. And, rightly or wrongly, that's what they're going for. But I think it is the right decision because you've got Pettersson in a contract year. He's going to have a huge year. You got to keep Quinn Hughes happy as well. Thatcher Demko, he's one of those guys that, if he can get back to the Demko of a few years ago, he could really steal a lot of games for you and potentially, go on lead you on a playoff run as well if they were able to just get in. I feel like they're one of those teams that's like, what, if we've got the goaltender and with some of the pieces that we have, we just need to squeak in and we could potentially go on a run. So I'm fine with, I can see the rationale for 4, but I'll go with 5. Happy with that because I could see 5 teams making the playoffs from this division. So the more I think about it, the more I kind of like what Vancouver has done here, and they've certainly plugged some holes.